Minnesota Vikings absolutely cook the Patriots in joint practices, plus a 53-man roster on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. Today on the show, quick note about joint practices. However, we talked a lot about yesterday's joint practices with Tyler Forness. You can listen to yesterday's show for that. It went a little different today. I will link in the show notes Tyler's recap, and I'm sure he'll have a podcast somewhere up about it, so go check those things out. But long story short, the Vikings dominated in all phases. Patriots media is posting like cringe GIFs, and just every single new thing was okay, Josh Dobbs interception, Drake May takes a sack, touchdown, JJ McCarthy to Jordan Addison. JJ McCarthy in particular was absolutely on fire. He threw a ton of touchdowns, especially in the red zone. He hit everything. Balls were out on time. Balls were sharp. They were quick. They were accurate. It was a pretty good way for the Vikings to send off basically any public access. That was the last public practice I believe the Vikings are going to have. So that's the last thing we're going to see of JJ McCarthy until week 1. And what a nice taste to leave in your mouth. It was just dominant everywhere. In particular, to Jonathan Grenard and Will Campbell, just not a matchup that anybody needed to see. Andrew Van Ginkel has a little something somewhere and wasn't participating, so Dallas Turner played against the Patriots once. He made his share of splashes as well. And I mean, you could just go up and down the roster. Every single person did something really cool. There was like one Hail Mary that Drake May completed over Joshua Metellus, probably the worst moment of the Vikings practice, both because it was complete and also because Joshua Metellus got hurt on the play. He landed kind of awkwardly on his arm, his shoulder, and got up, had to be tended to by the trainers, but was walking around on the sideline for practice. It didn't go directly into the locker room, probably a good sign with that injury, but we really have no way to know. He was walking around. It looked like he was still kind of favoring it. His shoulder was kind of hanging. It could be anything from a stinger and he's going to wake up a little sore and that's going to be that. Or it could be, broken collarbone or, it's an AC joint and he's out 6 to 8 weeks, or it could be something horrible. We would literally have no way of knowing until the team actually tells us, and hopefully we'll get Kevin O'Connell up in front of the podium at some point to tell us about it. So those are the headlines of joint practices. A lot of positivity coming out of the Vikings, a lot of negativity coming out of the Patriots camps, and we'll see what happens in the preseason game, which will probably not feature anybody's ones. They got very physical. They also had like 4 different scrums. There's a lot of fighting going on. So I think the ones have kind of gotten what they need to get out of that. And that was really the dress rehearsal. That is going to be more the true dress rehearsal than any training camp or than any preseason game will be. So instead of harping on all that or, going over clips from the stands or whatever, I owe you a 53-man roster. I haven't done one on this show since after OTAs, since May. So you are owed a 53-man roster projection. So let's update. I'll tell you what I had in May and how it is updated. I also did one on the squad show last week. On the Vikings squad show, we all did a 53-man roster. So a lot of this is sort of that is built off of that, plus whatever adjustments I make off of the Texans preseason game and any like joint practice stuff or injuries, of course. But one of those changes is that I'm doing it. I'm putting Max Brosmer on the 53-man roster. I have always felt very confident that they will keep 3, no more, no less, in terms of quarterbacks. And maybe if somebody's on the practice squad, I don't really care. But that it makes sense to have 3 quarterbacks in the building. You have your starter, your backup, and because of the way that the active-inactive rules work, you can get an extra active player if your third emergency QB is on the 53. And that's pretty valuable, and I just don't really see a reason not to take advantage of it. So I've always felt that it's 3 QBs, and the question would be, can Max Brosmer crack that lineup? Now, when I talked about this after OTAs, the idea was, look, Brosmer's QB4. It's going to be hard to get reps. They want to give JJ McCarthy a lot of reps, so you're already kind of have a diminished pie to share between Howell, Brosmer, and Brett Rippon, and you're going to have like 2 opportunities, and you kind of have to make a play in one of those. And he did, and then he got out in the preseason game and got a little more opportunity and made some more plays. The momentum is trending such that Brosmer is going to overtake Brett Rippon. Am I overreacting to one preseason game? It is entirely possible. But I think the way I see it is if they were doing 53-man rosters today, Brosmer hasn't quite done enough yet to overtake the like status quo of Brett Rippon. But they aren't making a 53-man roster today. They're making their 53-man roster after 2 more preseason games in which Brosmer will play a lot. Also, he had a good day in the joint practices. And I think over the course of those 2 games, he's gonna prove enough. That's the prediction that I'm making, that Brosmer's gonna prove enough over the next 2 days. By the way, the next time I will do this one more time, and it's gonna be right before cutdown day. So we'll see what the next 2 preseason games hold, and if I still have this take. But for now, Max Brosmer, QB3, and then of course JJ McCarthy, Sam Howell. At running back, this is where I kind of started to run into the chief problem of this 53-man roster, which is hard to come up with 53 guys. It's just not like years past where you want to keep 56, 57 players and everything is deep and you're going to cut rosterable players left and right. You might cut some rosterable players at certain positions that are particularly deep, but the roster itself, there are a lot of people that I could absolutely just say goodbye to. But one of those things, one of these luxuries that you get when you don't have a ton of roster pressure, luxury, you'd rather have some roster pressure, but is that when you have a really close battle at the roster bubble, you can just keep both. And that's what I'm doing at running back. I got Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, Ty Chandler, and Xavier Scott. I think if it came down to it, it's sort of a similar thing with Brosmer and Rippon, where Ty Chandler probably still has the job in the depth and the spot of the depth chart, but Xavier Scott is coming up real close on his heels, and over the next 2 preseason games will have ample opportunity to prove that he deserves the job. And it is trending that way really hard. Not only did Xavier Scott have a nice game as a running back, outside of pass protection, which I think is the only thing that's really stopping me from just whole hog putting him over Ty Chandler, but rather special teams. He took the personal protector role on punt coverage. He also had some nice plays on kickoff coverage. The kick returner role is Ty Felton, so Chandler doesn't have that going for him anymore. And Chandler has had his own fair share of blemishes in pass pro anyways. So it's really hard. Like, Ty Chandler used to have all these tendrils into the roster, right? Hey, I'm on this team. I'm on this unit. I'm important here. I'm good at this. And they're just like one by one getting severed by other people, young players and rookies on the roster, which is why I think Ty Chandler's roster spot is really, really tenuous. And I had him cut until I got to the final, until I got through all the positions and noticed I had 51. And I went, all right, well, I guess I'll put him back in there. Obviously, CJ Ham as well. So that gives us 5 running backs, 3 quarterbacks. We're up to 8. At wide receiver, this is another one where I'm really struggling to find who the guy is after the easy ones. The easy ones, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Nailor, Ty Felton, Lucky Jackson. I think Lucky Jackson just made it. I think that's just over. Jordan Addison, not part of this right now. He's going to start the season on the suspended reserve list. And so obviously somebody is getting cut week 3 when he comes back, or week 4 when he comes back. And bumped down to the practice squad or whatever. Maybe that guy is Xavier Scott or Ty Chandler. Maybe that's what happens to that. But that leaves us with only 4 wide receivers, and I bet O'Connell wants to keep 5 or 6. But who's that guy? I don't think it's Silas Bolden. I think he had a genuinely awful preseason game in a bunch of facets. He lost the punt return job to Lucky Jackson, by the way. He was the one who came in after Rondale Moore as the backup. He returned 2 punts and I think did a really poor job. He didn't take the lanes right. He tried too hard to like juke and make guys miss and get that like huddle highlight thing. But you just got to take your yards and fall forward. I think Brandon Powell is in this mix, even though he's not in the organization right now. I think he could join it soon. With Rondale Moore's injury, I think that's a free agent pickup that could very much make sense. They didn't do it. They did have, they cut Brian Asamoah. They put 2 players on IR. They replaced all of those players. They brought in a new O-line and a couple of linebackers. So they're back to 91, but I don't think that that's prohibitive at all. And with Powell, he knows the system. So I don't think there's really a reason you need to bring him in with any urgency. It's not like there's any other team sniffing around him. He's been on the free agent market all offseason, and he doesn't need the camp. So you might as well bring him in on cut down day and say, hey, you remember how to do everything, right? That gives you a nice little floor, or maybe even just have him on speed dial. Maybe you don't even bring him in cut down day, but you call him week 2 like the Vikings like to do with their Cam Akerses and Dalton Reisners. Maybe Brandon Powell's just one of those guys. But either way, I'm just setting aside a slot in this free agent world, or in this wide receiver world, for free agent TBD. Maybe it's a guy that gets cut from another team. Maybe it's Brandon Powell. Maybe it's somebody else, but a free agent wide receiver joins. That puts us at 5, and then Jordan Addison becomes the 6th when he rejoins the team. As for tight end, not a lot of surprises. TJ Hockenson, Josh Oliver, still anticipating Gavin Bartholomew does not start the season on the active roster. I think he's going to be on PUP or some sort of IR, maybe designated to return. But I have Ben Urasek still. I think it's very wide open. They have been flirting with Giovanni Ricci as a tight end / fullback hybrid, which maybe pushes CJ Ham. We talked about it a little bit on the squad show with CJ Ham. Cutting him would save $2.7 million or something like that. And that could be an attractive option if you had somebody else that could play fullback, right? Who also serves as a tight end 4 and can be in 12 personnel and stuff. The problem is when they did that with Ricci, he was really bad. So I don't know if that experiment worked out, but CJ Ham's been around in the Vikings, and he was an inheritance, right? So O'Connell and Kwesi don't necessarily have the same connection to him, but he's been a captain for a long time. So it would probably take somebody would have to be good at fullback to justify that. I don't think we're there, but I do think that they've considered it. And then we move on to the trenches, which will be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a bunch of investments or 401ks lying around, collecting dust because they were from a job from 8 years ago and you forgot about it. Whatever it is, you could end up leaving money on the table if you're not managing it properly. And that is what Monarch Money is for. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. It does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending and feel in control of your money. And this is going to do a lot more for you than just a spreadsheet. This is actually going to give you insights and the information you need to make the correct decisions with your finances. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off of your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. Moving along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast, it's time to talk trenches here on this 53-man roster projection. And I'll be honest, the offensive line isn't that interesting, but maybe is going to become interesting. There's a couple little underrated storylines that maybe have slipped through the cracks if you haven't been an everydayer, or you haven't been locked in super hard to the third quarter of a preseason game or what's been happening training camp practice to training camp practice. But this has nothing to do with the starters. The starting O-line is set and there's clearly no decisions being made there. Christian Darrisaw, when he's healthy, comes back. He's looking pretty good for week 1, actually. Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Brian O'Neill. That's the starters. It's the backups where you get a little interesting. Blake Brandel has been playing a little bit of right tackle, played a little right tackle in the preseason, looked pretty good. He's been playing a lot of right guard and some left guard. So he's a swing backup lock for the roster. Michael Juergens, who I came at pretty hard on after the preseason game. I had a little trouble in the TV angle identifying who was who and accidentally blamed Michael Juergens for some plays that were not his fault. So I do not think he had as bad of a game as I thought on the live watch. Rewatching the tape, it was totally fine. It wasn't perfect, but it was totally fine. And then there's Walter Rouse and Justin School. So Justin School's had a horrible camp. He's been just posterized by Jonathan Grenard over and over and over again. Nobody can block Jonathan Grenard. The Patriots can't block Jonathan Grenard. Will Campbell was baptized by Jonathan Grenard in that second joint practice, and honestly took a couple of lumps in the first one too. That was a little bit more even, but you would struggle to say that the Patriots won it, is what the vibe I got from Tyler. But So, like, I'm not blaming Justin School too bad for losing to Jonathan Grenard a bunch. He seems like he is just totally dominating and completely unblockable, and he's come with a totally new energy and fire, and I'm really excited to see it in real football. But Walter Rouse has had a really nice camp. He's the only guy on the twos that can handle Dallas Turner. He had a pretty good preseason game, I thought, against the Texans, and I'm excited to see what he can do in the preseason again. They have put him in with the ones when Christian Darrisaw isn't there, of course. They have put him in with the ones at left tackle instead of School. They're flirting with it. They're thinking about it. And here's the thing about Justin School's contract. You save over $1 million if you cut him. He only has $250,000 guaranteed, plus a signing bonus that he got when he's back in March when he signed. If you think Walter Rouse is better for this job, Justin School becomes an obsolete player and a really easy cut. And then you start opening the door for one of these other interesting young upstarts on the O-line. There are some undrafted rookies that got some hype going in, like Logan Brown, and that isn't working out. Logan Brown is buried very deep on the depth chart. He didn't come into the fourth quarter last year. He's buried behind Leroy Watson, who had a horrible preseason game, but was having a good camp other than that. They also brought in Michael Gonzalez as a replacement for Zeke Correll, who fractured his ankle. Vershawn Lee is having a rough time. I don't think it's any of these guys. But Joe Huber had a great preseason game and has worked his way in pretty cleanly with the ones. I think he outplayed Henry Bird, who is also, the guy on the second team every preseason and has been in the practice squad for 3 years. It makes sense to kind of say, all right, we have seen what we need to see of Henry Bird. Let's go with the young guy in Joe Huber, at least for the practice squad slot. But if you cut School, suddenly, because Blake Brandel is so position flexible, Walter Rouse and Blake Brandel are your backup tackles. And then you have Michael Juergens, backup center, can play guard if he has to, and Joe Huber as another swing backup on the interior, and you have a pretty set up interior offensive line. I think it's worth thinking about. I didn't do any of that on the O-line. I didn't cut Justin School and keep Joe Huber, but I am keeping an eye on that. And if the preseason continues to trend this way, where Walter Rouse continues to overtake Justin School, I'm probably going to do it on the next one. On the D-line, again, there's not a lot of drama, at least, especially with the starters, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Hargrave, by the way, completely destroying the Patriots in both of the joint practices. Hargrave was one of the standouts of the joint practices, in particular, making mincemeat of Garrett Bradbury. But don't look. Don't look at that. I lied. I didn't say you. That's not the truth. Okay, I'm fake news. Of course, Harrison Phillips, Jalen Redmond has made quite a name for himself too. Those guys are your locks. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins has been working with the ones a lot in rotational, like third down only situations, which, if I recall, was similar to what he did at Georgia too. But so he seems like he's a rotational guy, and that leaves you, if you use the same roster numbers as last year, where they kept 6 D linemen. That leaves you one spot left, and it was for Levi Drake Rodriguez last year, and I have Levi Drake Rodriguez in that spot again this year. But this year, I think he gets into the rotation, and he seems to be a little bit more. He seems to have taken a step forward for sure. But there are a couple guys very much nipping at his heels. There's Taki Taimani, who did not have a great preseason game. There was one disruption I saw that I thought was really good, and it turned out to be a total freebie. And actually, this may be a good moment to talk about this kind of third team preseason thing, right? Because Elijah Williams is the other guy, and he suffers from it as well. Elijah Williams had a really great day, but it was all against the threes. So what do you make of that, right? These guys are not going to make the Houston Texans O-line, that group, then they can't crack it, right? Like this is not the most serious competition, and therefore it's difficult to evaluate. But what you don't want to do is just say, well, it's the threes, therefore it doesn't count. Because then that essentially renders everything that happens in a preseason game useless. And we very much know that that's not the case. The idea is you got to watch those plays and decide, was that a bad pass set or a good pass rush? It's a judgment call. It's play to play. And for me, my judgment call is that, Taki's best moment was a protection bust. The Texans just made a mistake. They didn't pick him up. And he got right in, and the quarterback had to run around. I think it turned into a pressure, not a sack. But it looked like Taki Taimani beat somebody. He was unblocked, completely unguarded. It's as much credit as you get for Laquan Treadwell catching a busted coverage touchdown against the Seahawks. Like, way to not drop it, but like nobody guarded you. Okay, you're not moving me. with Elijah Williams, he did beat these guys, but their hands were totally inactive. Their feet were in front of their body, and it made them, it gave them horrible leverage. They just weren't playing good football, and so they were pretty easy wins to stack up. What that tells me, though, is that Elijah Williams does not belong on the third team anymore. He should get run with the second team. Let's try him against some guys that are maybe going to make the New England Patriots and see if he can do the same thing. So as it stands right now, I'm not cutting Levi Drake Rodriguez for Elijah Williams. And I think Levi Drake has done enough on his own merit to earn that level of benefit of the doubt as well. But I've got my eye on it. I mean, there's a few things here I've got my eye on, right? I've got my eye on Elijah Williams. I got my eye on Joe Huber. I've got my eye on the tight end situation. I got my eye on Brandon Powell in free agency, right? Some things that could very much change about this one, but I haven't quite seen enough to be comfortable doing it. I got my eye on Max Brosmer as well. And then for the outside linebackers, the edge rushers, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Turner, Gabe Murphy is pretty clear, Bo Richter. I haven't changed that once throughout the entire offseason, and I don't really see a reason for it to change. I don't think Tyler Batty has proven that he is a rosterable player. Chaz Chambliss has not proven that he is a rosterable player. And the only other players that you could even think about are like Cam Gill, who just joined. He's one of the linebackers that just joined. He's listed as an outside linebacker. I don't even know if that's really his position. Or Max Tooley, who I think is listed as an inside linebacker, but I saw him listed as outside linebacker in other places, and I forget if he's. But like we're talking about guys that like have either been cut like this month already, or are just not playing up to that level. I think there's a really clear 5-player group and then a huge fall off after it. So then we have to deal with the secondary, and that's an interesting one. We'll get into that next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's preseason, and when it is preseason, that means it is fantasy draft season. I am going to be drafting with Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Yahoo is the go-to for a reason. You can come up with all kinds of interesting ways to play. They have a bunch of new features like guillotine leagues or other sort of tertiary ways to play fantasy football. But there's also, of course, your classic leagues, or you can make up your own scoring system like the infamous Hell League of Norse Code, which is operated through Yahoo Fantasy. You can do anything as normal or not normal as you want. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. Every time I have done a 53-man roster this offseason, I think the third segment has started with, all right, let's do the secondary. It's always so unpleasant. And it is, I think, at the epicenter of the chief problem of this roster, which is I'm kind of throwing in guys that otherwise wouldn't really make the team. Like, I mean, I've got one of these, I've got a free agent TBD, right? By the way, if you don't want to allow me to do that, Jayshon Jones would probably be my guy at wide receiver. It's not Silas Bolden. He was horrible at just about everything he did. He dropped one. He was a bad punt returner. He was a terrible punt gunner. Thayer Thomas, by the way, has been, sorry, I'm going to go back to wide receiver because I forgot to talk about the real depth guys. Thayer Thomas has gotten some work with the ones. He was really bad as a punt gunner and punt jammer. He got beat pretty bad. Or no, just as a gunner, not as I don't think I saw anything as a jammer. While he's another one that's in like the Henry Bird category for me, where like he's been in this organization for long enough where it's going to start to be real tempting to look at the fresh new meat. But anyways, let's go to the inside linebackers. There's not a lot of drama here anymore after Brian Asamoah gets cut. Ivan Pace, Blake Cashman, Eric Wilson, Kobe King. There's those two Auburn linebackers in Austin Keys and Dorian Mousey, and then I guess Max Tooley too, if he's not incorrectly listed on our lads here, but none of those guys really move the needle for me. I think Keys and Mousy did interesting enough stuff on the threes to like be fighting for a practice squad slot, but none of them are making the kind of splash you would need to like cut Kobe King. And by the way, Kobe King's playing pretty well, so that feels pretty easy to me. And then we get to the cornerback room. So I have, as it stands, you got your three specialists, by the way. Will Reichard. I still have Ryan Wright and Andrew De Paola. We talked yesterday about Oscar Chapman maybe coming up on Ryan Wright's heels. That's another one that I've got my eye on for sure, because Ryan Wright has had very much ups and downs this camp. Oscar Chapman now taking holding snaps, and you wouldn't mess with your kicking operation unless you were really thinking about actually making that change. You don't really mess with that timing or throw off the rhythm of it, even in a few practice reps, just to try it. So I'm definitely keeping my eye on that, but I still have Ryan Wright for now. That leaves 10 spots remaining for the secondary, for cornerbacks and safeties. Typically, there have been 6 corners and 4 safeties. I'm going to do the same thing here. But the Zamaya Vaughn spot that everybody has been talking about, it makes me a little bit suspect. So let's count them off. You got Byron Murphy, Isaiah Rodgers, Jeff Okudah, Mekhi Blackmon, and I think Nudie McGlothern. I think Dwight McGlothern has had a really nice summer, and I see no real reason to overturn his roster spot. I don't think Zamaya Vaughn has been as good. And a lot of people watch the preseason game and disagree with me. So this might be a controversial thing that is in the eye of the beholder, but at least for my money, I thought Dwight McGlothern was way stickier in coverage. He was in the right place a lot more, and he reacted a lot faster than Zamaya Vaughn did. Zamaya Vaughn got put in some difficult spots, and I like that. I think that's great. Challenge him. Let's see, sink or swim. Let's really stress test it. But he was late to a couple things. He didn't quite have the right tackling angle, and then it gets a little awkward, or he gave up a slant, that kind of stuff. But that would be your 6 corners, right? And then at safety, Harrison Smith, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson, and Jay Ward. I think Jay Ward, by the way, entered this camp very much on the hot seat, in danger of losing his spot. And I think he has more than acquitted himself. He's had made a bunch of plays, basically 1 or 2 plays a day. You hear, Jay Ward with a cool interception on Sam Howell or whatever. And in fact, a lot of the bad stuff that Sam Howell had this camp was Jay Ward specifically doing that to him. And I also thought he had a nice preseason game. So I think he's more than acquitted himself. If you don't like Zamaya Vaughn, I still think they seem intrigued enough with him where I still think he's the guy that makes the roster. But I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him lose his roster spot to a veteran like Tavier Thomas, who had a nice day as a punt jammer, who had, I think, roles on all 4 special teams units, who's been moved to safety where he was usually a nickel corner. In Brian Flores' defense, the difference between those two things is there's a big Venn diagram. There's a lot of overlap, so he was kind of doing the Josh Metellus role, I would say, but on the second team, and had that one pass breakup that I thought was a good play. He got called for DPI. I think that was total BS, and I don't hold it against him at all. There were a couple of other players that stood out in the preseason game, right? Khalif Hailasi has those 2 interceptions. They were both gifts. They don't move me at all. And the same thing goes for Ambry Thomas. Reddy Stewart had like one pretty cool play, but it takes more than one pretty cool play to overturn the status quo, especially when Jay Ward is playing well. So maybe you could go 5-5, right, with Tavier and then cut Zamaya Vaughn or something like that. I wouldn't be shocked. It's kind of a hard decision, but either way, like, I think in an ideal world, you're not keeping either of these guys, and you have somebody that has clearly overtaken them. And I don't think that that's the case. I don't know who that would be. So all that said, the last couple positions here are still very wide open. Somebody could have 2 great preseason games and enter this conversation, even if they haven't done anything to this point. Absolutely. There's room for that. But I don't like, saying free agent TBD because this room ain't good when it comes to the wide receivers and sort of nuking the depth there and getting rid of some of these mainstay practice squatters and starting a developmental arc from scratch. But that said, last time we did that, it netted us Lucky Jackson, who's now probably making this roster. I'd be pretty surprised to see him cut. It netted us undrafted guys like Bo Richter and Dwight McGlothern. It gave us those chances. And we're kind of looking for the next one of those. Not necessarily the next Ivan Pace. That doesn't happen a lot with an undrafted rookie, but the guy that can sneak onto the roster, get into the good graces of the coaches for a year, and then have an incumbent advantage going into the next camp, and then suddenly you're just part of the team. Next time we talk, it'll be after the preseason game, immediately after the preseason game. 000 we go live on the YouTube channels for Locked On Vikings and Locked On Minnesota Sports. And then the audio for that will go up on the Locked On Vikings audio as well, audio feed as well. So if you're just an audio listener, you'll get that shortly thereafter. And then I'll do a proper show on that'll go up Sunday morning. And then we'll continue on from there. I don't think I'll do one Monday morning. I think we'll do the same thing we did last week. And then after the third preseason game against the Titans, I will do the Monday show, and it'll be the final 53-man roster. I think how that's going to play. This is how that's going to play out, pending, schedule stuff. No promises ever. But I will see you all for all of that. And as always, Skol.